There is a certain kind of person who walks through life as if every emotion has been quietly switched off. Not dramatically, not with noise or collapse, but silently, like a light dimming in an empty room. And if you ever meet someone like this, you might not notice it at first. They appear normal. They laugh at the right moments. They nod when they should. They say the words people expect them to say. But look closer, and something feels distant. Their reactions are half a second too slow. Their smile feels borrowed. Their presence feels like a body standing where a soul should be. People often misunderstand them. They assume these individuals are cold, or indifferent, or simply don't care. But the truth is much quieter, much sadder, and far more complicated. Because people who feel nothing anymore didn't start this way. They weren't born numb. They learned it, piece by piece, moment by moment. Until eventually, emotion became something that hurt too much to hold. Numbness is never the first wound. It is always the last layer of protection. You rarely see the years that lead up to it, the disappointments that piled up, the betrayals that didn't stop, the moments when they tried to express something real and were met with silence, dismissal, or cruelty, the times they felt too deeply, cared too much, gave too freely, and paid for it. So they stopped feeling. Not because they wanted to, but because their mind made a quiet decision. This is the only way I can survive. And so a slow internal winter begins. A winter that no one else sees. A winter that covers everything. They stop expecting warmth. They stop hoping for relief. They stop believing that feelings lead anywhere but disappointment. There's a heaviness inside them, but not the dramatic kind. It's a stillness that doesn't move, doesn't shift, doesn't warm or cool. It just sits there, like frozen water waiting for a season that may never come. If you talk to them long enough, you notice something almost paradoxical. The numbness is not emptiness. It is exhaustion in disguise. A body overwhelmed by emotions it can no longer process. A mind that once felt everything too intensely, now refusing to feel anything at all. But perhaps the most striking part is this. People who feel nothing anymore are not weak. They are not broken. They are not lost causes. They are simply tired. Tired in a way that language rarely captures. They have learned to function without passion, to continue without motivation, to wake up without purpose, to move forward without hope. And yet, they do move forward. There is a quiet strength in that, a silent endurance, a kind of resilience that goes unnoticed because it doesn't look heroic. But surviving without feeling takes a kind of courage no one ever celebrates. People admire the ones who fight loudly, but no one celebrates the ones who continue silently, especially when they stopped feeling long before they stopped living. And the world never notices the moment numbness begins, because the collapse is internal, invisible, private. But they notice something else. A person who once felt deeply now feels nothing at all. And that transformation is one of the loneliest experiences a human being can go through. There comes a moment in a person's life when the emotional system simply shuts down. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. So gradually that even the person themselves doesn't recognize the shift until long after it begins. At first, it feels like fatigue, just tiredness that won't go away. Then it feels like distance, like watching your own life from behind a glass window. Eventually, it becomes silence, a kind of internal muting where every feeling is reduced to a faint echo. People who feel nothing anymore often remember a time when emotions came naturally, when joy felt warm, when sadness felt meaningful, when excitement lit up their chest, when love was something they could actually feel instead of analyze. But now everything is flat, not bad, not good, just flat. And this is what confuses the people around them. Because emotional numbness is not sadness. It's not depression in the traditional sense. It's the absence of emotional charge, the absence of a spark. Imagine trying to cry, but no tears come. Imagine trying to care, but your heart just won't respond. Imagine knowing what you should feel, but being unable to feel it. That's the reality of emotional numbness. And here's what makes it so heavy. They still function. They still go to work. They still talk to people. They still do everything society expects. But the inner world is on pause. People often ask, why don't you just feel again? As if emotions were a light switch. As if numbness was a choice. But numbness isn't a refusal to feel. It's a defense mechanism. A psychological shutdown triggered by too much pain, too much chaos, too much emotional overload. It's the mind saying, if I keep feeling everything, I'll break. And so the system closes, protects itself, seals the doors. The person becomes calm on the outside, even peaceful. But inside, there's a blankness that frightens them more than pain ever did. Because pain at least meant they were alive. Numbness feels like drifting without direction, without weight, without identity. One of the hardest parts is how misunderstood they become. People take their lack of reaction personally. They say, you don't care, you're cold, you're distant, you're detached. They don't understand that numbness is not detachment from others, it's detachment from oneself. And yet, something incredibly tragic happens. People who feel nothing anymore become experts at pretending. They mimic emotions they no longer feel. They smile because they know smiling is expected. They agree because conflict feels pointless. They nod because explaining their numbness feels exhausting. In a way, they become actors playing a version of themselves, a version that the world finds acceptable. Meanwhile, the real self is somewhere deep inside, quiet and unreachable. But perhaps the deepest irony is this. Numbness isn't the absence of emotion. It's the result of experiencing too much emotion for too long. It's the aftermath of emotional overload, the burnout of the soul. People who feel nothing anymore weren't born numb. They were overwhelmed into silence. And if you look closely, you can still see traces of who they were before the shutdown. In the way their eyes search for something they no longer expect to find. In the way their voice softens when speaking about the past. In the way they pause just a second too long before answering questions that touch something real. There is a story behind every numb person. A story of too much feeling. A story of too much pain. A story that didn't break them, but left them unable to feel the world the way they once did. There is something strange about the moment numbness becomes your new normal. You don't notice it right away. You don't wake up thinking, I can't feel anything. It creeps in quietly, like fog filling a room. Not dramatic, but undeniable once it's everywhere. People who feel nothing anymore often describe the world as muted. Colors look the same, but they don't reach them. Music sounds familiar, but it doesn't move them. Moments that once felt meaningful now feel like empty scenes in a movie they're only half watching. And perhaps the saddest part is this. They remember what it was like to feel. They remember the warmth of anticipation, the pulse of excitement, the ache of missing someone. They remember how emotions once flooded their chest effortlessly. Now, they rely on memory to remind themselves of what living used to feel like. Psychologists call this emotional blunting, when the nervous system shuts down the emotional volume to protect you from further overload. But to the person experiencing it, it feels more like drifting, like being present without being here, like existing in the outlines of life while the colors stay just out of reach. And here's the part people rarely understand. Numbness isn't peaceful. It isn't calm. It isn't relief. It's a quiet panic, a muted alarm, a sense of, something is wrong with me, but I don't know how to fix it. Because when you stop feeling pain, you also stop feeling joy. When you shut down sadness, you shut down excitement. When you numb heartbreak, you numb love. The system doesn't let you choose which emotions to silence. It shuts down all of them. That's why emotional numbness is not emptiness. It's exhaustion. Exhaustion so deep that the heart puts itself into standby mode. People who feel nothing anymore often become excellent at functioning. They do what they must. They keep moving. They stay composed. They show up, even when every day feels like an echo of the last. The world applauds their stability, not realizing it's survival, not strength. They speak in steady tones because their emotions are flat. They rarely argue because arguments require energy they no longer have. They avoid deep conversations because explaining numbness feels like trying to describe a color you can't see anymore. And yet, beneath all of this silence, there is a longing so quiet it almost feels invisible. The longing to feel again, even if it's pain, even if it's sadness, even if it's heartbreak. Because feeling nothing is lonelier than feeling hurt. People who feel nothing anymore sometimes engage in behaviors just to see if they can spark any emotional response. Listening to old songs, revisiting painful memories, watching things that used to make them cry. Not because they want the pain, but because the absence of emotion scares them more than the presence of it. And here's the irony. They often look calm, stable, controlled. People think they're finally okay, not realizing they are the furthest thing from okay. Because the opposite of happiness isn't sadness. It's numbness. It's the absence of emotional life. It's a heart that has forgotten how to respond. What people need to understand is this. Numbness doesn't mean the person is broken. It means they've survived something that overwhelmed their emotional capacity. It means they felt too much, too deeply, for too long. Numbness is not the end of emotion. It's the pause before healing. It's the body catching its breath after years of running. The silence is not permanent, but when you're inside it, it feels unbearable. There's a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when numb people begin to detach from the world. Not because they want to, but because nothing reaches them anymore. Conversations feel distant. Affection feels unfamiliar. Opportunities, fears, dreams. All of them pass through their mind like shadows moving across a wall. They're aware of everything, but connected to nothing. And they become experts at pretending. They smile at the right moments. They nod during conversations. They say, "I'm fine," with a tone so steady it convinces everyone, including themselves, for a second. Because numbness doesn't always look like emptiness. Sometimes it looks like composure. Sometimes it looks like independence. Sometimes it looks like strength. But inside, it feels like watching your own life from behind glass. People who feel nothing anymore develop a strange relationship with themselves. They stop expecting joy. They stop fearing disappointment. They stop hoping things will get better because hope requires energy. And energy is the one thing they don't have. Instead, they move through the world on autopilot, saving whatever strength they have for the essentials, surviving, functioning, not falling apart. And here's the part the world gets wrong. Numbness isn't a lack of emotion. It's the presence of too much pain that the mind no longer has the capacity to process. Behind numbness, there is almost always a history of overwhelm. Too much heartbreak, too much responsibility, too much pressure, too many moments where feeling hurt more than not feeling. So the mind learned to shut down the emotional volume, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. People who feel nothing anymore didn't choose numbness. They adapted to it. Their nervous system became tired of constantly ringing alarms. Their heart became tired of bruising itself on the same hopes. Their mind became tired of fighting battles no one else could see. And so it said, "If I can't escape the pain, maybe I can at least stop feeling it." It's survival disguised as emptiness. But numbness brings another kind of ache, the ache of absence. You start missing emotions you once took for granted. The excitement of looking forward to something, the warmth of feeling loved, the sting of being moved by a film or a memory, the simple joy of laughing without forcing it. You remember what those things felt like even if you can't feel them anymore. People who feel nothing often catch themselves staring into space, lost not in thought, but in the lack of it. Mental silence replaces mental storms. It's not peace. It's the inability to care enough to worry. But beneath the numbness, there is something still alive. A quiet signal, a faint heartbeat, a whisper. You still want something to reach you. Because numb people aren't emotionless. They're overwhelmed people running on emergency power. They're the ones who once felt everything intensely, the ones who cared too deeply, the ones who loved with their whole being, the ones who carried burdens no one else noticed. And when those people go numb, it's not apathy, it's exhaustion, deep, bone-level exhaustion, the kind that comes from years of holding themselves together while breaking quietly inside. And yet, even in their numbness, there is hope. Because numbness is not the end of feeling. It's the beginning of repair. The system is rebooting. The heart is conserving energy. The mind is trying to heal by creating distance. The silence isn't failure. It's survival. And here's the truth that almost no one understands about people who feel nothing anymore. They're not lost. They're not broken beyond repair. They're not cold. They're paused. Their mind has pulled the emergency brake because life demanded too much, too fast, for too long. And that pause, that emotional shutdown, is the body saying, I need time to heal, even if healing looks like emptiness right now. But numbness isn't permanent. It cracks, slowly, quietly, unexpectedly. Sometimes it happens in a small moment, like hearing a song you forgot you loved, or laughing at something without meaning to, or feeling a sudden sting in your chest when someone says something that hits too close. A flicker of emotion appears, small, fragile, almost invisible, but real. People who feel nothing anymore often don't even recognize it at first. They're so used to the world being muted that the slightest spark feels foreign. It scares them, it confuses them, it makes them wonder if they're losing control. But that spark is the beginning of coming back. See, the human heart never stays numb forever. It rests, it protects itself, it hides for a while. But deep inside, it's always trying to return, to warmth, to connection, to meaning. Because numbness is not who they are. It's who they became to survive. And survivors don't stay frozen. They thaw, slowly at first, awkwardly, unpredictably, in waves instead of lines. Sometimes the return of feeling hurts, because when numbness cracks open, the first thing that leaks out is often sadness, grief, old memories, unanswered questions. It's the emotional backlog resurfacing. Everything they didn't process now demands to be felt, and that's terrifying. But it's also necessary, because numbness didn't remove the feelings. It only delayed them. And healing is uncomfortable. It's messy, it's quiet, it's slow, but it's happening. People who feel nothing anymore often rebuild themselves differently the second time. Stronger, wiser, more selective, more aware of what drains them, what hurts them, what they will no longer tolerate. And that's the part no one tells you. Numbness is not the end of emotion. It's the end of illusion. It's the moment when someone realizes they can no longer pretend to be okay. It's the point where old coping mechanisms collapse, where the soul demands honesty, where the mind refuses to carry what almost destroyed it. People who feel nothing anymore eventually begin to feel again, but on their own terms. Not forced, not rushed, not for others, for themselves. They learn to feel gently, gradually, in pieces. A little joy here, a little sadness there, a moment of peace, a moment of longing. And one day, usually without noticing, they realize they're no longer numb. They're present. They're here. They're alive again. Not the same as before, never the same, but more grounded, more self-aware, more aligned with what actually matters to them. Because people who feel nothing anymore don't stay empty. They rebuild from the inside out. And when they return, when they finally feel again, they feel differently, deeper, truer, more intentionally. They stop chasing things that drain them. They stop tolerating what hurts them. They stop holding on to people who only take. They stop apologizing for needing space, rest, boundaries. They're not numb anymore. They're transformed. And that transformation is the quiet strength of someone who has survived their own silence. Someone who learned that feeling nothing was not the end, but the beginning of finding themselves again.